Hey, what's going on, guys? I think I got this to work finally. I uh, I made this a few days ago, this video, or what should have been, and apologize if you hear my dog Millie um, playing with her brother Horangi, because this time of day, that's what they do, and I'm trying to block that out. Um, anyways, I spent probably like an hour and a half making this video or continuation, and it was about the quarter turns and the flow of the quarter turns and grading. I got some good feedback from my friend Quincy. Quincy, if you're listening, thank you for your good advice about not spending too much time recapping like the context of this stuff. Um, so if you want to get some more insight into all that, just go to the first video. That might be a generational difference. I think I think the millennial in me um, thinks that's a useful thing to do for people who may not have been um, privy to the last few videos or each video. And Quincy's a little younger than me, and I think his generation, which I think is Gen Alpha or Gen Z, I can't remember. Um, I think they are less. They don't think like that. Not that that's a bad thing. I think generationally there's differences in what expectations are for how content should be consumed or made. Um, so yeah, rather than do an entire recap about what I'm doing here exactly, I'm just gonna get right into the grading. So as you can see, highlighted here is the quarter turns portion of the contest. And um, for this criteria, there are 9 different requirements. I know it sounds really fancy. I can't think of a better word. And I, I listed out 9 different requirements based on what the aesthetic expectations are for the quarter turns. And before I get into what these actual scores are, I do want to make it clear, or what's the word? I want to clarify that one of the reasons bodybuilding, I think, has so much subjectivity or perceived subjectivity is there is not really clear language about what success looks like. Not that nobody is able to communicate this. Um, I do not believe, or to my knowledge, there is no great consensus about what success looks like exactly. And even that statement, I think there's a lot of people who would disagree with that, which I think is wrong. Um, and I'll give you an example. So, an example of this might be um, words, commonly used words, right? So, for one example of a word that's commonly used in bodybuilding would be good conditioning, right? And that you'll see here in the next few rows. I have rows 19 through 23 dedicated to that exactly. And that word specifically, I do not think everybody has a consensus about what that word means. I think the word conditioning means different things to different people. And I think that actually creates a lot of problems. I don't know if that's the best word to use. Sounds negative, but uh, I think saying anything else might be sugarcoating. And I say problems because there in my opinion, if you want to call bodybuilding a sport, you have to have clear requirements that determine scoring outcomes. And I used this in my last video. Uh, Football, American football, there are clear outcomes for what determines success, right? You have to, the ball has to travel X amount of yards for it to qualify as a first down, right? Um, the ball has to cross an imaginary plane set by pylons in the end zone to qualify as a touchdown. Um, the ball has to be in the ball carrier's hands. I don't remember all the exact rules, but you see my point here. There's clear requirements for success and what determines an outcome. And in bodybuilding, I really don't like uh, this idea that it's a sport when there aren't clear requirements for success. And I think that's true because, um, like, if someone were to disagree with that statement, I'd ask why, right? And I'd expect someone to say something like, well, there's the poses, right? There's the front double bicep, for example, or the back double bicep. That's a clear requirement. And I would disagree that that's not clear because not everybody agrees what exactly that means. There are people that would agree. Hopefully, those people are in charge of judging and scoring. Um, but in the community, even among professionals and coaches, there isn't a clear, I don't hear a clear communication about what that means. And in this case, I'll just jump ahead real quick because I'm on the topic. I listed out for the back double biceps 7 requirements. This doesn't mean that this is exactly how judging should word it. They might break it down into 8, be more, use different words, group different requirements, group requirements differently, I should say. But I did spend a lot of time on these requirements here, and I can't think of a more accurate or precise wording for what success looks like in the back double biceps. And you'll see here that includes having the arms positioned in a way so that there's an aesthetic goal here. That otherwise, why have it? Why have a pose called the back double biceps if there isn't a clear requirement? And these things, I think it's kind of odd to me that these things have been passed down through generations of bodybuilders and judges and professionals, if you will, kind of just through um, tradition, I guess you could say. But you talk about a football game, real fans seem to understand the rules. But when I listen to bodybuilding fans or even professionals talk about it, I expect people to know what external rotation means. I expect people to know what shoulder abduction and arm adduction means. But I don't think that's the case because if it were the case, I think there would be a very clear understanding of what success looks like. I've met professionals. I'm not going to call out specific names. That's not necessary. But I've met professionals, IFBB professionals, that do not know what the word supination means or pronation means. They literally do not know these words, and these are words that they're not. It doesn't determine whether or not you're a bodybuilder, but I would equate that to being a professional football player, an American football player, and not knowing basic plays, not knowing what slants are, not knowing even names of positions, not knowing what a halfback is, not knowing what a right tackle is. Those are really basic things you expect from a professional in that sport, and that is a sport, right? But if someone were to call bodybuilding a sport, I have an expectation And I don't think that's a really unreasonable expectation that people know these basic things for requirements. Otherwise, is it? I don't think you can really call it a sport. I think this is more of a hobby with lots of pageantry. Um, it's very exciting, but to call it a sport, I think there has to be clear requirements. Maybe that's just me, but I think that's true. So here, I got sidetracked here, but I'll go over this in other videos. I have a bunch to make, but these are all requirements that I have listed for the back double biceps. Anyways, going back to flow. Somehow, I need to have a timer on this because somehow I've already lost my way through the topic of posing and whether or not this is a sport. Sorry, Quincy. I think that was feedback that you gave me. Is I feedback that I got inadvertently, which is to stay focused on the topic here, which is something I need to work on. So I I should have checked, but I think in my last video I ended with the back relax scoring here, and you'll see here I have each column C through H, or I should say the columns C through H, with initials of the competitors. If you're familiar with bodybuilding, which I assume you are because you're watching this, maybe you're not, but I assume you are. These are the top 6 competitors of this past year's Olympia, and that is Derek Lunsford for DL, Hadi Chupon, I should know his name. I apologize, but Andrew Jack, Samson Dauda, Martin Fitzwater, Nick Walker, and the current requirement in this video, which again I should have checked that I had already completed row 16, the back relax scoring. I'll just go through the numbers here. Um, this is like golf or how bodybuilding is traditionally scored on their sanctioned scorecards. Lower scores is a better score. So you'll see here in row 16, the back relax flow. I have Derek Lunsford with the 1. Um, you see here with Hadi Chupon, I have a 4.375. And just very briefly, I'll go over that where that number comes from. He placed 4th in this specific requirement or criteria, and the decimal value of 375 comes from the fact that out of, I think it is, real quick, out of 8 requirements, Hadi got 3 deductions out of the 8. So if you divide 3 by 8, that is 0.375. I only go to the thousandth digit of the fraction because I chose to. I don't think going beyond that is necessary. I did also not round up or down. I used the exact thousandths value if there was one. If it was a 0, obviously I didn't add anything there. So that is Hadi Chupon's. Andrew Jack, I gave him a 6.5, not because it was my feeling or because that was my intuition. I have clear requirements for this criteria of the back relax pose, and he got 4 deductions out of the 8, therefore having a half decimal value added to his 6th place number. Samson Data, 2nd place, he got 1 deduction out of the 8th. Martin Fitzwater, you can see a pattern here, right? If I didn't make this clear earlier, if you see a repeat of numbers, in this case, 4th place, that is a tie, obviously, or maybe not obviously, that is a tie. And that number comes from the fact that ahead of 4th place, there is a 1st place and 2 second places. Therefore, because there are 3 competitors ahead, that puts the next competitor in 4th place. So there is no 3rd place in this row because to my knowledge, that is how many tying systems are done. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but that's how I did it, and I know I didn't make that up in terms of expectations. I think many other sports where scoring is involved does the same, or non-sports as well. And for Nick Walker, I have a 2.125. He got second in this specific criteria. Okay, so this video, hopefully I got it right. I am going right into the quarter turns, and I may have time for both the left and right sides. Uh, you'll see here in this specific criteria, there's a consistent placing here, which I think is great to see because if you, at least I know these numbers very well because I spent a lot of time. I don't even know. I didn't count. I guess around 40 hours of work put into this, including studying every single pose, um, pictures that were not of high quality. I went through other shots taken before and after that. I used the best possible non biased, unedited pictures for each of these poses, meaning I chose the photo where they were all posing at the same exact time. And if there was a competitor or two that didn't hit the pose, I made sure to uh, incorporate other photos where they did. And I also use the live stream or the recording of it to double check my work. I know there's people here who like to play devil's advocate or be a contrarian and say, well, it's not the same thing if you weren't there. I am aware of that. I am also aware that there are a lot of people who are able to form an accurate opinion based on photographs, based on the awareness of what photographs, um, what kind of perception a photograph can create, right? And what editing of a photograph might do to an opinion, which as I stated earlier, I specifically um, used photos from the NPC News Online website. So these were not edited. These were probably uploaded from an SD card on a hired photographer. I think his name was Jeff. I remember seeing a name. So again, I got a little sidetracked here, but the quarter turns you'll see uh, do just in this one row give you a little bit of an illustration about this specific pose, and that is many of the competitors, as expected, because these are considered the best of the best in professional bodybuilding, did not have an issue with how they presented their physique and how they have built their physique and presenting it in this specific pose. So for the criteria here, I have 9 different requirements. I'll just go. I don't know if I should read these all. It's kind of time consuming. Um, yeah, why not? I'll go through it just because I had the time. V shape created from shoulder to shoulder. You'll see that in the pictures here in a minute. Shoulder to shoulder with uh, I didn't write these clearly. I should rewrite these in a more clear way for people who aren't me, but I know what these mean. So the second one basically is saying that the shoulder width from shoulder to shoulder should appear wider than the width or the apparent width of the legs or the upper thigh. Third one here, I have the quads should appear to be beyond the abs and waist. Fourth, the pec facing the judges appears to have similar thickness. I always forget to edit this. I'm not going to do it now because you're watching. But by thickness, I also mean development, a similar level of development, a similar appearance of fullness in the quad, which you'll see might sound kind of vague, but once you look at the pictures, you can see how that actually appears in real life. So This is where I think this type of analysis makes more sense. Anyone who's a very skeptical person about data analysis tends to believe in anecdotal value more so, because I think they have a very black and white view of how data collection goes. And this is a mixed methods analysis, meaning I'm incorporating qualitative or anecdotal evidence or um, things that might be considered non-binary and turning it into numbers. So I am actually addressing two different ways of collecting data here. Continuing here, I have for the fifth requirement, the pecs and deltoid facing the judges appear to be a series of three similarly dense bubbles. I could probably reword this better, but basically, um, both deltoids and the pec should appear to be three circularly shaped muscles, uh, connected, obviously, and the depending on which quarter turn side it is, the pec closest to the judges should appear the largest and to be the centerpiece of these three muscles. Number six, I have the rear delt and tricep. Both have roundness and separated clearly at the rear delt and brachialis. I believe there were a few competitors that lost or had deductions based on this. There wasn't a clear separation, I think, at the brachialis for a few, between the rear delt. And then the last one here, the pec appears to be a few inches thicker and hangs over the abdominal wall. So I want to make it clear here, I am aware that in modern bodybuilding, or I should say, many people are aware that the waistlines are not as flat and tight as they used to be. And I don't think anybody here has what they would call Palumboism, or full blown Palumboism. But in this case, I'm specifically stating that the development of the pectoral muscles creates, like there's a visible shadow you'll see underneath the pec minor or the lower chest, and that indicates that there is a tissue that hangs over the abs or the abdominal ab. I can never say this word. I don't know why. The abdominal wall. Every time I say it, I feel like there should be an extra syllable. But all right, I got more. I forgot. So for the eighth requirement, I have the rear delt, upper trap, and tricep appear to cascade, meaning they appear to have kind of like peaks and valleys. And you'll see here what I mean once I go through the pictures. Um, and lastly, the brachialis and bicep appears to hang over the forearm. So there were a few competitors, I believe, that did not fully extend their arm, which is not really the worst thing. But the reason this is kind of like an unspoken, not a good thing, is that the people, I think a lot of competitors and even coaches forget there's a traditional expectation for some of these poses, not for the sake of sentimental value, but there's a purpose. And in the quarter turn, I'll just show you right now. Um, Derek did it correctly. So this arm isn't at full extension, but it's extended enough to show the development of the brachialis and the biceps. And if this were not developed well, you could see that because this would appear to have less mass. That's why the arm is expected to be extended like this. It's supposed to show the judges how exactly developed is this bicep and brachialis, and even the tricep as it's shortened. These are things that I think a lot of people forget because they just think it's like tradition and not really thinking about the purpose. There's a purpose to this pose and what's traditionally accepted. Um, let's see here. So I'll just show you like in a comparison. So um, Brandon Curry you can see the mass here, but because he doesn't fully extend his arm uh, in the arm closest to the judges, it's not 100% clear how developed this brachialis and bicep is. You know it's there. I think some of our brains tend to just create conclusions based on prior knowledge or what you already know, but I have a much clearer picture of how developed this bicep is by seeing the arm extended like this, because there is also a clearer line that forms because of this. Because this tricep is also shortened, I can see a clear line and separation. And I think had Brandon done this, as opposed to uh, the way he did do it, I think you'd see a much clearer um, bicep, brachialis, and tricep here. Okay, so that's just we got a little sidetracked there, but that's why these requirements exist. That's why I say here, or I said earlier, for this to really be considered a sport, I think people really have to take that, uh, use that word in for what it is, right? A sport isn't purely just being athletic. Otherwise, you could call working at the circus being a what do they call them? One of the doing the person doing the acrobatics, call that a sport. That's not a sport, right? There's an athletic element to it, but for a sport to have, be basically qualify to be on ESPN. There has to be a scoring element that's very clear, right? There has to be some gamesmanship that is very clear. All right, so moving on. If you cannot tell, I did not take my ADHD meds yet. So let's go back here. Derek, the first competitor who is evaluated. No deductions, right? Let's see here. He has a score of 1. V shape created from shoulder to shoulder. Boom. That's a V shape right there. I should also include that this line drawn from one shoulder to the waist or pelvis, and the line drawn from the other shoulder down to the hip or pelvis creates a V shape, which includes the waistline and the lat. That helps. That's a part of the V shape. If you just look at this this imaginary line from the delt to the buttocks and don't consider what's in between, some of the competitors don't have a very as clear of a V shape, but I think it's important to note that you can't discount what's going on here. That maybe it's because the trunks take away from that line, but there is a line that's created at the top of the buttocks and the quads where the torso meet, and that contributes to that V shape. All right. Moving on here. Oh, I got to go through all the requirements. Say exactly why he got a first place. Shoulder to shoulder, that width is wider than the leg thickness. So if you look here, shoulder to shoulder, definitely wider than the front of the quad at its furthest point to his posterior chain, wherever you want to consider either his glute or hamstring, definitely wider up top, right? This would be different for a wellness. I've never scored a wellness contest, but I'd assume they'd have different requirements, right? Moving on, number 3, quads appear to be beyond the abs and the waist. So this one I have to be clear because some of way the way the camera's angled and the way some of the competitors are structured or posing, it doesn't really make it as obvious if your frame of mind is off. So I'm judging this based on using the torso or the center of the abs as the reference point and drawing a straight line down to the pelvis, or basically where the beginning of the hip is, right? Not following the abdominal wall, but just a straight line from point A to point B, right? Where that hip begins. That is definitely this line you can see here. There's definitely a quad in front of it. That's what I mean. Okay. I don't mean from here to here, like a line straight from the center of the abs to the floor. That would be impossible. I mean, I think there's one competitor who has quads that enormous, but I'm talking about a line from here down to the hips. And if you were to continue that line, I want to see that the quad interferes with that line, or crosses that line. Number four, pec facing the judges appears to have similar thickness or, like I said, development as a quad. So this is what I meant by that. I see here that this pectoral muscle appears full. It does not sag. Um, there's definitely a shadow created here at the bottom, which indicates that there's muscle tissue hanging over the abs or the obliques here. And this, to me, fills this structure, this space here, just as well as the quad, the tissue from the hip down to the knee on the ventral side is developed. This is, to me, this is equal development. It's not exact in that, oh, I'm counting the number of muscle fibers. How could I possibly know that? I'm talking about visually. I want to see that there's roundness in both of these muscles, similar roundness. There's a competitor. I'll just show him. Where is he? Um, where is he? Oh, I'll even use this gentleman right here. I didn't score him because he didn't make the top six, but his pectoral muscle here, to me, seems slightly more developed than his quad. There's not as much roundness here. I would like to see more roundness because there is roundness here at the bottom of the pec. I see there's a shadow. I see that it hangs over the abs. Here, I don't see roundness where there is, maybe it's the angle. Um, but if someone were to not have tissue hanging over that kneecap in the same way that they have tissue hanging over their abs, that to me would be clear disproportionate development, right? So I didn't score him, so I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but that's my point. Okay. Continuing on, I have that the pecs and delts facing the judges, um, or the pec facing the judges, has the appearance of a series of muscles. So I see a circle here, or a spherical shape here. I see a muscle here, and I see a muscle here. What I meant by the whole pec being the, or maybe I didn't say this. To me, the pec should be the centerpiece. So this muscle right here has to be the largest of these three muscles. Um, I consider this delt here just to be an extension and capping this pec, but I want to see that these three muscles almost create kind of like I don't want to say the thing that I'm thinking because that's not very rated PG, but um, I want to see that basically this delt is similarly sized or appears to be a similar size to this pec, and they are like ornaments to this centerpiece here, the pec closest to the judges. Um, I'll just go over real quick. Like in this case, um, this to me is cutting it close, but I have to go look at his score again, but I think while this is bigger, maybe he did meet the requirement here. There is a side pose where it's not clear that these are similar in size and this muscle is the centerpiece. It wasn't Andrew Jack, I don't think, in this case. All right, so moving on. Rear delt and tricep both have roundness separated clearly at the rear delt and brachialis. So going back to Derek, there is separation here between the rear delt, right, and the tricep. And I also see that there is a line here where the rear delt and medial delt converge and separated, are not, there isn't a blurriness here between that and the brachialis. That's a good thing. Moving on here, the pecs appear to be a few inches thicker. I already showed you that, but I'll show you again. There's a shadow here, and that shadow is created by the fact that this pec hangs over the abs, or the core, as some people say. Let's see here. Rear delt, upper trap, triceps appear to cascade. I think you might have seen that here earlier. This is what I mean by cascading. The traps converge or have a peak and then a valley. And then they move on to the rear delt. There's a peak and then a valley. And then there's another peak at the tricep and then a valley, right? It's a cascading effect, okay? It's a good thing. You want to see that. And then in the ninth requirement, the brachialis and bicep appears to hang over the forearm. So Derek did this well. His bicep and brachialis appear to hang over or have tissue that extends beyond the forearm. I don't think many competitors have biceps that are so small that it doesn't do this, but if his biceps were very underdeveloped and his brachialis were very underdeveloped, that might not be as clear. Or if he had like Popeye forearms, you would see that to be a problem, right? So, 9 requirements. This is why he got first. Moving on to Hadi Chupan. Where's Hadi Chupan? I think he is in the. Where is he? Where is Mr. Hadi Chupan? Uh-oh. I know I have all the competitors. Let's go through this again. That's not good. I know I have it. Sorry guys, technical difficulties here. Did I accidentally delete this? I know I looked at this. Guys, I am so sorry. Let me just go through these real quick. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Where is Hadi Chupan? I should have 2 different slides here. Okay. I'm going to pivot, as they say, and I'm going to go right to the actual source of my information, because it's no good. There's an expectation here to have the quarter turn to the left for Hadi Chupon. And I do not have that here presently. So I believe I have a link attached to this photo. I didn't even do that. What am I doing? What am I doing? You're kidding. Now I know I attached links, but I don't seem to know how to access these links. There's a quarter turn to the right. Guys, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to start over. But I do need to find this link. I know I have it. If I can't find this link, I'm going to... Oh. Okay. No. There's the photographer, Jeff Binns. Ay, ay, ay. I almost feel like I am dreaming that I did this. Now, I know there's a link button here. And there's no link attached. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to go straight to the NPC News Online. Okay, this takes me to... It's ridiculous. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. Well, luckily the quarter turns are early, so it's not going to be hard to find the quarter turn to the left. Okay. There he is. I know I had a slide with this. I am so confused right now why I didn't have this earlier. So, well, now you'll see how I picked photos. I find the first photo where all the competitors hit the pose because that tells me they are they heard the judge ask for the pose. And some of these photos are not taken exactly. I don't think the timer was set consistently. So I'm going to use this one right here. This first photo. There's Hadi. Okay. There is Hadi's quarter turn to the left. I'm going to clean this up. Okay. So quarter turn to the left. Let's go through these requirements again. I'll do this quickly. V shape. Let's look at Hadi. Boom. V shape. Kind of hard to see because of the shadow, but there is a V shape here. Boom. Okay. Shoulders wider than the thighs. Boom. Wider. That is definitely wider. Number 3, quads appear to be beyond the abs and the waist. There's the center point down, quads beyond the waist. Pec facing the judges appears to have similar thickness. I see a shadow here, development. The quad even has a shadow at the base of the quad over the knee. That is fullness in both muscles. Pecs and deltoids appear to be a series of 3. 1, 2, 3. Pec is open. Some of the competitors did not fully open this pec, therefore creating an illusion of a smaller pec. And this is definitely the centerpiece. This pec and this delt seem similar in size. Number 6, rear delt and tricep both have roundness separated clearly at the rear delt and brachialis. Let's take a look. Separation here, although not the greatest separation. I count anything to qualify as meeting the requirement. So there's a line here. There is definitely separation between the rear delt, brachialis, and tricep. Number 7, that was 8. Oh, wait a second. Did I go over it? Okay, pecs hanging over the abs. Okay, I lost that for a second. So shadow created because the pecs are hanging over the abs. And cascading, peak, valley, peak, valley, peak, valley. That is a cascading trap rear delt and tricep. Brachialis and bicep appears to hang over the forearm. And let's see here. Arms extended, good. Bicep, brachialis, hanging over the forearm. Just barely. See, this is why it's important. I can see Hadi's biceps are not as thick as some of the other competitors, but he has that development to show. And what I mean by not as developed, look at Hadi's bicep. See, you can't really tell when it's flexed like this. See what I mean? There's no clear line. This gentleman here, Dorian Haywood. I see much more fullness here in that extended arm. There's a little bit of a shadow here and a little bit of the lighting. The way this looks tells me there's less mass in between this front delt and the elbow than this guy's bicep, right? We're not currently judging mass. That's another category which I did score. We're just determining flow. So, Adi, guess what? Got a perfect score. Therefore, first place. Andrew Jacked. Now back to the original presentation. Andrew Jacked. I had to go over his multiple times because he has a physique that can give you the impression, if you're not thinking about it in an organized way, you might think that he didn't meet the requirements, but he did. So V shape, this was one of the requirements. Because of his skin color, he's darker obviously, and because of the way his torso is positioned, it kind of looks like there isn't a V shape. But if you look closely, I see from the lat down to the waist, this is a slant. That's a V shape. So shoulder to pelvis, that is a V shape. Not the greatest V shape, but it is there. Okay, that counts. Shoulder to shoulder width is wider than the legs. Definitely wider. Some would say too wide, but that's not the point right now. That is wider. Quads appear to be beyond the abs and the waist. So using the waist as a reference, going down just barely because of the way he positioned his torso, just barely does the quad interferes with this line or crosses the beyond the line. Okay. Pec facing the judges appears to have similar thickness as the quad. There's a shadow. I see fullness, quad, shadow here towards the knee, fullness. That is similar development. Let's see here. Pecs and deltoids, series of muscle, 1, 2, 3. He did a good job of showing his full pec. You'll see in later photos and poses, he does not do this. I think he has an injury or some serious tightness and knots in his upper back and delts that limits him in certain poses, which is a big reason why he did not, according to this score sheet, place higher than you'd expect. But in this specific pose, he was able to show the edge of the pectoral and where it inserts or originates from the delt right here. Let's see here. Got lost. Rear delt and tricep both have roundness separated. Let's see. I see a round rear delt. I see a round tricep. Separation. Boom. Number 7, pecs appear to hang over. I already showed you this. There's a shadow hanging over because there's mass, there's development. And I do want to note that I see gyno here. That is not good. And that is addressed in the first section here under row 6, gyno. He did get marked for gyno, so that counts. Going back to Andrew Jack, the requirements. Let's see here. Pecs hanging over, rear delt. Cascading, rear delt, tricep, trap. Peak, valley, peak, valley, peak, valley. That's a cascading trap, rear delt, and tricep. And brachialis and bicep appear to hang over the forearm. Let's take a look. Bicep, brachialis hangs over the forearm. Boom. That counts. Perfect score. Good job, Mr. Andrew Jack. Samson Dauda also got a perfect score on this criteria. Let's see, where is Mr. Dauda? Not Dauda, as Bob Ciccarello called him. I think the first couple of years he went to the Olympia. Let's take a look. V shape, definitely not the best angle, but you can see he still shows a V shape at the bottom of the lat. Not clearly visible because of the lighting and his skin color, but there's a lat and waist that creates a V shape just barely at this angle, and the front side down to his pelvis. That is a V shape right here. Boom. Shoulder to shoulder width wider than the leg. Boom. That's wider than the legs. Number 3, quads appear to be beyond the abs and the waist. Waist going down. That is beyond, or the quad is beyond. I did review this a lot because at first glance, if you were to just draw a straight line down, right, that would appear to be not the case. But because of the camera angle, if you're not really looking closely, that can create that misconception. But what did I say earlier? I'm going along this line right here, right, down towards the center of the body, and that's where you can see that his thigh clearly has more development, or he doesn't have palumboism. Pec facing the judges appears to have similar thickness as the quad. I see a full, round, not sagging or flat looking pec. I see a full, round, not saggy, flat looking quad. Again, the shadow, the lighting, skin color kind of makes it hard to see, but you got to look closely. You can see it's round, goes over the kneecap. Let's see here. Pecking deltoid facing the judges appears to be a series of 3. This angle made it a little bit challenging, but I can still see development. And his posing is so spot on, even though he's a very big guy. I see that the pec is still stretched out, and the main centerpiece, while this pec and this delt are like ornaments around the centerpiece here. Good job on that pose. Rear down tricep both have roundness and separated clearly. Separation, there's a line right here. That's all you gotta say. Pecs appear to be a few inches thicker and hangs over the abdominal wall. There is a shadow here, hangs over. Boom. Rear delt, upper trap, and triceps appear to cascade. Now, this is where I think he started to get either misjudged or second glances. Because I think last year, because he downsized compared to the last year, this isn't as pronounced. But I counted any sign of the requirement being present still counts. It's not about how in this criteria. It's not about how pronounced it is. It's about whether or not it exists. So I see a peak and a valley, peak and a valley, peak and a valley. That counts. That is a cascading trap rear down tricep. I believe if you look at his photos from last year, or even by the time I made this video, the most recent show, you might even see it now at the EVLS Prague. Um, I bet you when he's at a stage weight of over 300, this is more pronounced. But he came in kind of flat. And even then, there's a cascading effect. Um, let's see here. And lastly, the brachialis and bicep appear to hang over the brachioradialis of the forearm. Bicep, brachialis, even at this angle, still hangs over. It's beyond the forearm. So good job, Samson Dada. And in sixth place, so I got to go over the scoring here real quick. There is no second, third, fourth, or fifth because there are 5 competitors that tied for first. And because there are 5 competitors ahead of Martin, that puts him in 6th place. That's how these tier systems work. And because he had 1 out of the 9 requirements deducted, so just 1 requirement out of 9, he had a decimal value of 1 repeating to the thousandths place. And that was the 8th requirement that he had missed. And I had made a notation here that the tricep appears slightly flat and not a distinct cascading appearance of muscle. Tricep and rear delt appear slightly flat, although distinct. And just a reminder, um, that was the cascading one. So let's look at Martin's tricep, rear delt, and of course he's not in this photo. So I got to go to NPC News Online. There he is. So this is what I meant by the cascading effect. Okay, this is what I meant by flatness. Can I zoom in more? Can I zoom in more? How do I zoom in? There we go. Okay. There's a peak, there's a valley. There's a peak. I do not see a clear valley here. Okay. This tricep, the peak of this, or the valley of this between the rear delt and the tricep is still able to, you can still draw a line from this to the rear delt. It's not deep enough. I think had he stretched out his arm or extended his arm more, this valley would be pronounced more. Um, but it's not developed enough. That's why these poses matter. Look, look at Hadi, right? Hadi's triceps, I can't remember how they looked last year or at his best, but if he had flexed his arm just even 10 degrees, 5 degrees more, this right here would not be as apparent. This he might actually lose points, but he has the cascading effect. There is a clear peak that doesn't that cannot have a line drawn to um, that. What am I trying to say here? It it cannot cross this Rudo, right? Whereas right here, you see, it barely is able. It like you can see this tricep. It goes right along, and I'm not even going over like whether or not he has a tricep. It's about what the judges would see at first glance, right? Um, yeah, it has to be very clear. And like I said earlier, if I see any inkling of something, I do not dock a point. But because it's taking me so long to determine whether or not this is a deduction, I gave Martin a deduction here because to me, this is not a clear valley. All right, so that's why Martin got um, sixth place on this, even though he only had 1 point deducted. All right. Okay, guys. I think I had spent a lot of time on this, so I'm gonna stop here um, and just give you a preview of the next video. The next one's gonna be about quarter turns to the right. You'll see here similar case, not exactly, in that there were a lot of ties for first. Derek Lunsford did get fifth. You know what? No, I don't have time for it. But yeah, I thought I have time just for Derek. I might as well. So Derek got fifth in fifth place on this quarter turn, and it's because his delt. I think. Oh yeah, this is a pattern you're gonna see here. There was an issue with his delt and pec having clear separation in a lot of these poses, and you'll see here later that um, there is a case to be made that the Mr. Olympia placings were not correct because of this. Um, this is not a diss. I got to make this clear. This is purely an educational thing, purely a resource for future scoring. I'm not gonna say what. I'm not gonna use the P word as they say. Um, by that I mean politics. But I'm just gonna show here. I know there's adult. This is where you have to really like take away your bias or knowledge, prior knowledge. I know there's a delt. I know this is not one muscle, right? But there's a smoothness here between the delt and the pec, the delt and the pec, that doesn't really show me a clear line and separation between the delt and the pec. And it's not the entire delt. Like there's some lines, right? I see a little bit of a darkness here, a little bit of darkness here, right? But right about here is where there's smoothness, where it almost seems like there's a fusion of the pec and the delt, right? The pec seems to ride into the delt, and um, right here is where there's a smoothness that you don't see in other competitors, right? Here, there's a line. It's a very small, dark line, but I see a distinct line here, even though he didn't place in the top. there is a smoothness here that tells me this. It makes it almost look like a heart shape, right? This deltoid in the pec, it almost looks like a heart shape because of that. So that's why he got fifth in this one, as opposed to other competitors not losing on that. So just again, just to show you real quick, this is what you're going to see in the next video here. Just a comparison of the other quarter turns. Oh, here we go. This was the best quarter turn in the entire contest. Martin Fitzwater. You'll see it. What's interesting too is that there are specific poses, both in the quarter turns and the mandatories, where a competitor who may not have won the contest had the best pose for a specific, or had the best of a pose. And out of all the competitors, I can actually um, not just say, but point out through this scoring sheet why Martin had the best quarter turn to the right. And interestingly enough, not his left. But here, I'm just using this as an example. I see a clear line, right? Separation, 3 bubbles. But in the case of Derek Lunsford, this looks like one muscle right here, right? So that wraps up this video, guys. I can't wait to show you the end result because I'm not going to show it to you yet. You might have seen this already at the beginning. I can't remember, but it's not what you think. I finished the scoring sheet yesterday or early this morning, but no, it was yesterday. Um, but I went through every single round of posing, every single pose. Um, if you watch my first video, I have non-posing criteria broken down in the front relax, back relax, the quarter turns for flow, conditioning, as well as what I call heaviness distribution, which is just a kind of like a more clinical sounding way of describing what muscle symmetry and balance is. So someone being top heavy is not balanced. Someone being body heavy doesn't have good heaviness distribution. Or a more drastic example would be having a left arm that's far more developed than a right arm, right? So that's what that means. And then just a quick side note here on the conditioning. I specifically chose the front double bicep to indicate conditioning for this because beyond the front relax, back relax, and quarter turns, because the front double bicep um, is the most open pose there is and shows the judges the body fat levels on the abs and the adductors as well, which is where a lot of competitors tend to hold fat or water or show how conditioned they are. A lot of people talk about glutes. You can see the glutes in these other. I mean, you can see the abs in these other poses as well, but um, this is the glutes are contracted in the back double bicep, and whereas in the adductors shown in the front double bicep, um, it's really hard to contract them the same way you can contract the glutes. And because of that, combined with the fact that the front double bicep is such an open pose and it really exposes weaknesses, I use that as a way to measure conditioning. Whereas if most muscular, you can almost hide conditioning a little bit because you're really squeezing all the muscle and flexing all the muscles in the body. And I use the first round of the front double bicep and the third as a comparison, just to illustrate in like an insight in my subtotals here how competitors changed over time through the contest, um, which is why this is marked in the conditioning category. So you'll see here there are competitors that held the same condition or similar levels, right? Like Derek, um, and someone like Hadi got more conditioned over time, right? He kind of had some softness going on in the first round, but by the third round, his physique got progressively harder looking, at least in certain muscle groups. And some competitors um, stayed the same, but relatively they placed lower. And then some, trying to look for an example. Okay, so Martin, he seemed to fade a little bit, right? In as prejudging went on. So he had only one deduction in the first round in the front double bicep, but had um, three. And I made an annotation here that the third one was actually kind of hard to find because of the. He was really, you could see in the photos actually on NPC News Online how well or not well a competitor poses, or almost like you can tell how anxious they were because you'll see over the videos I make here. Martin consistently is the last person to hit the pose. So much so that you can see that he is unable to get into the pose fully on certain shots, and um, I had to go through multiple pictures just to see that he did it. But the camera, this is where like you got to use your critical thinking skills. Um, Whoever took the pictures, right? I think his name was like Jeff something, Jeff Binns. This person, I assume, started to take pictures after they had heard the judges call for a pose, and they have it's a kind of like a call and response. So they hear Steve Weinberger or whoever it was. I think it was Steve Weinberger say, "All right, gentlemen, front double bicep." They hear that, and then that photographer takes the photographs, right? But if you notice, um, not in this one, but there's certain pictures where you can see competitors are late. There are competitors that are late to do it or take a really long time to do it, and that actually matters. I'll talk about that later because these posing rounds are very quick. If you watch the live stream, every pose or the time between poses is not, it's just about 10 seconds at the most. And it starts to get shorter and shorter as the poses, as they move towards the end of a round. For example, they don't spend a lot of time on the most muscular in the ab and thigh as they do, I think, like the side poses. And that matters because you have to put yourself in the shoes of the judge and see that the judge is only able to evaluate the competitor in a limited amount of time and all the competitors. So, and um, that's considering that they're doing it in a side by side comparison as well. So if a competitor is the last person to hit the pose and not able to be compared um, on time with the other competitors, that judge could deduct points for that, or they might not. They might just make something up. Obviously, you don't expect that, but if you think about just human nature, or what the fact that these aren't robots, these are people. Think about what their tendencies might be. They want to get this done. There's pressure to get this done correctly, right? But as they are seeing it live, they only have a limited amount of time to compare everybody at once, and there's distractions going around. There's you don't really have the convenience to communicate with other judges all at once. Okay, I need to see more of this or that. There's a head judge, right? So that's why I'm saying all this, because I think one of the things that hurt Martin in this contest, besides not having the same amount of development as some of the other competitors, or posed as well, his posing was off, and that was more apparent in some of the. You'll see, but that's just a little sidetrack there. But you'll see that in the next videos. That's it for me, guys. Thanks for listening. Again, this is Yale on Instagram. I go by Lieutenant Yale. And thanks for following. If you like this video, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and share with any friends that you think would also enjoy and see value in this recap of the Mr. Olympia, this past year's Mr. Olympia. Thanks, guys.